The throne room of the alien empire was silent. Long banners of silver cloth hung from the high ceiling, swaying gently as if afraid to disturb the tension in the air. The walls glowed with faint blue light, alive with shifting patterns that responded to the queen's presence. At the far end of the hall sat the alien queen herself, her tall frame wrapped in black and gold robes, her crown like a living flame above her head. Her eyes, deep and sharp, searched the warrior kneeling before her. The warrior was General Koresh, one of the Empire's most loyal commanders. His armor bore the scars of many battles, and his name was spoken with respect across the stars. But now that same warrior knelt with his head low, facing his ruler's piercing gaze. The queen's voice broke the silence. It was soft, but every word carried weight. "So the rumors are true," she said gravely. "You really bonded with the human." Gasps echoed through the hall. The courtiers and guards who stood along the walls shifted uncomfortably. No one dared speak, but their eyes burned with curiosity and disbelief. A bond with a human was unthinkable. Humans were seen as weak, reckless, and too unpredictable to be trusted. For one of the Empire's strongest generals to form such a connection was almost an insult to their proud history. General Koresh lifted his head slowly. His dark eyes did not flinch, though the weight of the queen's words pressed on him. "Yes, my queen, the rumors are true." The hall buzzed with whispers. Some courtiers sneered, others looked fearful, but all waited for the queen's judgment. The queen's gaze narrowed. "Explain yourself, General. Why would you, the most loyal of my commanders, bind yourself to such a fragile creature, a species barely known to the stars? Do you not know what this means?" Koresh bowed his head again, but his voice remained steady. "I know, my queen, but I also know what I experienced. Without that human, I would not be standing here today." The queen leaned forward slightly. Her crown flared, casting shadows across the walls. "Speak, tell us what happened." The beginning of the bond. Koresh took a breath. His mind returned to the barren world where everything had begun. "It was during the mission on Vela," he said. "We were ambushed. My ship was struck, and I was cast down into the storms of the desert. I thought I would die there alone." The courtiers listened, some with doubt, others with unease. "I wandered through endless sands," Koresh continued. "My armor was damaged. My strength was fading, and then I saw him, a human. At first I thought he was a ghost of the heat, but no. He was real." Koresh's voice softened as he remembered. He was not a soldier. Not even armed. Just a lone explorer with nothing but tools and scraps. Yet he did not run from me. He did not hide. He offered me water. He saved me. Murmurs filled the hall. The idea of a human saving one of their greatest generals was almost laughable to some. But Koresh's tone carried a weight that silenced open mockery. "We were trapped together on that world for many cycles," Koresh said. "The storms would tear apart any shelter. The predators hunted without rest. Food was scarce. I thought he would not survive even one night. But he surprised me again and again." The queen raised an eyebrow. "How could a human so frail survive what you barely endured?" Koresh's lips curved in something almost like respect, because he would not give up. His hand shaped tools from scraps of metal. His mind found paths where I saw none. He made fire from nothing, drew water from stone. His body broke many times, but his spirit did not. And when I was wounded, he carried me, though he could barely stand himself. The hall grew quieter. Even the most doubtful courtiers could not ignore the weight in the general's voice. Koresh looked up at his queen. "That is how the bond formed. Not by choice, not by ritual, but by survival. By trust, he saved me as I saved him, and in that bond I saw what I had never seen before." The queen's doubt. The queen leaned back on her throne. Her face was unreadable, her long fingers tapping the armrest slowly. "You speak of him as though he were an equal," she said. "Do you truly believe humans deserve such honor?" Koresh hesitated only for a moment. "I believe humans are more than we thought. They are fragile, yes, but their strength lies elsewhere. In their will. In their courage. In the way they stand when all logic says they should fall." The queen's eyes flickered with something, curiosity, or perhaps unease. "Do you love this human, General?" The question rang across the chamber like a blade. Koresh bowed deeply. "Not as you mean, my queen, but I respect him. I honor him, and I will not deny the bond between us." The queen studied him in silence for a long moment. Then she rose from her throne, her tall form casting a long shadow across the hall. The air grew heavier, the courtiers bowing their heads. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of the empire itself. Then you have brought us to a dangerous path, Koresh. A bond with a human is not a small thing. It will divide the people. Some will see it as betrayal, others may see it as a sign. Her gaze swept across the chamber, silencing every whisper. And if this bond is real, it will test us all. A kingdom stirs. The queen turned and walked toward the great window behind her throne. Outside, the stars burned bright, endless, and eternal. She spoke without looking back. Bring the human to me. If he has truly bonded with one of my greatest generals, then I must see him with my own eyes. Let him stand before the court. Let us judge what kind of creature he truly is. The hall erupted in whispers again. The idea of a human standing in the sacred court was unheard of. Many were already imagining scandal, conflict, even rebellion. But no one dared to oppose the queen's command. Koresh bowed deeply. As you wish, my queen. The queen finally turned back, her face stern and unreadable. Know this, General. If the human is truly as you say, he may change the future of this empire. But if he is not, your bond will be your downfall. Koresh did not waver. I understand. The queen's crown dimmed slightly, her voice returning to a grave softness. Then let it be so. For now, you are dismissed. Koresh rose, bowed once more, and walked out of the throne room. The whispers followed him like shadows. Some voices carried scorn, others curiosity, but all carried one truth. The empire would never be the same again. The general's thoughts as Koresh stepped into the cool night air outside the palace. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere among them, the human he had bonded with still waited. The memory of their time together burned bright in his mind. The laughter in the middle of despair, the stubborn refusal to surrender, the strange mix of weakness and strength that made the human unlike any being Koresh had ever known. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. The queen's command would place the human in great danger. The empire's traditions would resist this bond with all their strength. But Koresh also knew something else. The human would not back down. Not now, not ever. The desert planet Vela was a place where life clung to the edges of existence. The sky was always a storm of yellow and red, with winds that screamed across the endless dunes. The sun burned mercilessly during the day, while the nights froze the air until breath turned to mist. Nothing on that world was gentle. Nothing welcomed strangers. General Koresh remembered it clearly. His ship had been struck in battle, flames tearing through the hull as it spiraled downward. When the wreckage finally crashed into the dunes, he thought he would not rise again. His armor was broken, his strength fading, and the desert around him was nothing but death. He staggered across the sand, searching for shelter. His people might never find him here. His enemies surely believed him dead. Each step grew heavier, and he felt the desert waiting to claim him. That was when he saw it, the faint shape of a figure in the distance. At first, Koresh thought it was a mirage. Heat often created illusions on desert worlds, but as the figure drew closer, he saw it was real. A human, thin, tired, but alive. The human carried a pack strapped to his shoulders, his clothes torn and sun-bleached. His skin was burned by the sun, his lips cracked, yet his eyes were sharp with awareness. The human froze when he saw Koresh. A towering alien in battered armor was not something any human would expect to meet in such a wasteland. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the desert wind shrieking between them. Koresh had no strength left for battle. He expected the human to flee. Instead, the human reached into his pack, pulled out a battered flask and held it out. Water. Koresh remembered the shock he felt. A stranger, one who owed him nothing, offered him life. He took the flask carefully, his voice rough. Why help me? The human only shrugged. Because you look worse than me. First days together. The human's name was Elias, a lone explorer who had been studying the strange storms of Vela before his own craft malfunctioned and crashed. He had survived by scavenging pieces of his wreck, building tools from scraps and hunting small desert creatures with traps made of wire and bone. His camp was nothing more than a shallow cave, shielded with broken metal panels, but it was enough to keep the storms at bay. Elias shared food, water, and fire with Koresh. At first their words were few. The general spoke with the authority of a warrior, while Elias spoke with the tired calm of a man who had been alone too long. But survival has a way of forcing trust, and soon they were working together. Koresh hunted with what remained of his weapons, bringing down larger desert beasts. Elias showed him how to cook their tough meat so it would not poison them. When storms tore at their shelter, Koresh used his strength to anchor the metal panels while Elias patched holes with strips of cloth and resin he made from plants. Day by day, they learned to rely on each other. Yet Koresh could not ignore his doubt. He had always believed humans were reckless and weak. But here was one who survived where even Koresh had almost perished. Elias did not have the strength of a soldier, but he had something else. A mind that never stopped working. Ingenuity in the desert one evening. As the storm howled outside, Koresh watched Elias carefully twist pieces of wire together, connecting them to a shard of his broken ship. "What are you doing?" Koresh asked. "Making light," Elias replied simply. Koresh frowned. "There is no power, no core." "That scrap is useless." "Not useless," Elias said, his hand steady. "It still holds a charge. Enough for a spark." Moments later, a faint glow filled the cave as Elias coaxed a shard of crystal to hum with stored energy. The cave walls reflected the dim light, pushing back the suffocating darkness. Koresh stared, both impressed and unsettled. To him, broken machines were nothing but trash. To Elias, they were possibilities. Another time, their water ran dangerously low. Koresh believed they would be forced to risk traveling across the dunes in search of an oasis. But Elias had another plan. He built a crude condenser using scraps of metal, fabric, and a cracked container. At night, the cold air caused the desert's hidden moisture to gather, dripping into the container. It was slow, but it gave them water enough to survive. "You think differently," Koresh admitted one night. "Where I see endings, you see paths." Elias gave a tired smile. "That's because I have no choice. Weak men like me don't get to stop trying." The first rescue, the bond between them, deepened one night when Koresh was injured. They had ventured too far into the dunes, hunting for food, when a predator attacked. It was a creature like a scaled wolf, its body armored with plates, its eyes glowing in the stormlight. Koresh fought it with his blade, striking true, but not before its claws tore across his leg. The wound was deep. Blood flowed, and Koresh could barely walk. He expected Elias to leave him. After all, dragging a wounded alien across the desert was madness. But Elias did not hesitate. "Lean on me," he said firmly. Koresh growled. "You cannot carry me. You will break." "Maybe," Elias said, "but I'll break trying." And so he did. Elias wrapped Koresh's arm over his shoulders, staggering beneath the weight. Step by step, he dragged the general back toward the cave. His legs trembled, his breath ragged, but he did not stop. When Koresh urged him to leave, Elias only shook his head. "Not happening." By the time they reached shelter, Elias was half conscious from exhaustion. Yet he still worked, cleaning the wound with fire-heated metal, wrapping it with strips of cloth, and refusing to rest until Koresh was safe. The general lay awake that night, watching the fragile human sleep beside the fire. For the first time, he saw humans not as weak creatures, but as beings with a strength that came from somewhere deeper. A test of will days turned to weeks. The storms worsened, and food grew scarcer. Koresh's wound healed slowly, and Elias grew thinner with each passing day. Yet his determination never wavered. When Koresh tried to take more of the burden, Elias refused. "One day," Elias said, "someone might look at me the way you look at humans, weak, not worth saving. If that day comes, I hope they're wrong." Koresh remembered those words for the rest of his life. Their greatest trial came when the cave itself collapsed during a violent quake. Rocks tumbled, sealing the entrance, trapping them inside with little air. Koresh pushed with all his strength, but the stones held firm. His injured leg gave out, and he fell back, despair rising in his chest. Elias, gasping for breath, crawled to the pile of rocks. He studied them, tapping each stone, listening to the hollow echoes. Then he began to dig, not with strength, but with strategy. He pried loose small stones, creating gaps, shifting the weight carefully so the whole pile would not fall on them. Inch by inch, he worked until a sliver of light broke through. Fresh air rushed in, and hope returned. When at last the path was clear, Koresh dragged himself out first, then pulled Elias after him. They lay on the sand, coughing, laughing weakly, alive. In that moment, Koresh knew without doubt, this human was not weak. Fragile, yes. Breakable, yes. But never weak. The unseen bond, Koresh later realized the bond had already formed by then. It was not a ritual, not a choice, but something deeper. It was trust built through fire and storm. It was respect born of shared struggle. It was two beings who should never have survived, keeping each other alive. Elias never spoke of it. To him it was natural to help, to fight, to refuse surrender. But to Koresh it was life-changing. He had fought countless battles, faced countless enemies, but never before had he seen courage like this. Courage without armor, without weapons, without even the promise of survival. That courage lived in Elias's heart, and Koresh could not forget it. Returned to the present in the throne room, Koresh's story echoed through the court. The courtiers whispered, some with disbelief, some with awe. The idea that a human had shown such strength was difficult for them to accept. Yet the sincerity in Koresh's voice left little room for doubt. The queen sat silently for a long time. Her eyes, sharp as blades, studied Koresh as if weighing every word. Finally she spoke. "You speak of him with great respect. Perhaps too much. We will see if this human is truly what you claim." Her gaze turned cold. "Bring him here. Let the Empire see this creature who has bound himself to one of my greatest generals." Koresh bowed deeply. "Yes, my queen." As he rose and walked from the hall, his mind returned to the desert, to the human who had carried him when no one else would. Elias had survived storms, beasts, and despair itself. But would he survive the judgment of an empire? The day the human entered the royal court was a day the empire would never forget. From the highest towers of the palace to the markets in the lower city, whispers spread like fire. Some said the human was a trickster who had bewitched General Koresh. Others claimed he was a fragile pet, dragged into the halls of power as a joke. But there were also those who whispered of omens, of an ancient prophecy long ignored. By the time Elias was escorted through the great gates, the court was already full. Courtiers lined the walls, their jeweled garments glowing in the pale blue light of the palace. Guards in shining armor stood tall, their spears crossed as the human passed between them. The air hummed with tension. Elias walked with steady steps, though his heart pounded inside his chest. He had survived deserts, storms, and predators, but this was different. Every eye was on him, sharp and judging. He wore no armor, carried no weapon, only simple clothes patched with his own hands. To the aliens, he must have looked pitiful, yet his back was straight and his eyes did not waver. General Koresh walked at his side, his tall form casting a shadow over the human. He had argued against bringing Elias into such danger, but the queen's command was final. And Elias, stubborn as always, had refused to be hidden. "If they want to see me," Elias had said, "then let them see me as I am." The queen's judgment. The queen sat upon her high throne, her crown glowing like a fire above her head. She watched silently as Elias approached, her gaze sharp and unreadable. When he finally stood before her, she raised one hand. The whispers died instantly. "So this is the human," the queen said gravely. Her voice filled the chamber, calm yet powerful. "So small, so fragile. And yet you are the one my general calls his bondmate." Elias bowed respectfully. "Yes, your majesty." "I am Elias." The court rippled with shock. Many had expected the human to tremble, to stammer, perhaps even to fall to his knees. But his voice was steady, and he spoke directly, though with respect. The queen leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what it means to stand here? You are no longer in the desert. You are in the heart of an empire that has ruled for centuries. Every word you speak will echo across worlds." Elias nodded. "I understand. But truth doesn't change no matter where you stand." The hall filled with whispers again. Some scoffed at his boldness. Others studied him with new interest. The queen, however, only watched, her expression unreadable. Doubt and challenge. One of the courtiers stepped forward, his robes glittering with emerald light. "Your Majesty, this is foolishness," he said, his voice sharp. "He is only a man of flesh and bone. How can such a being be worthy of our respect? He must have deceived the general with tricks." Another courtier joined in, her voice smooth but cold. "Yes, let him prove himself. Let him show us this so-called strength that captured General Koresh's loyalty." The queen lifted her hand, silencing them. Her eyes returned to Elias. "They speak for many here. Tell me, human, why should we believe in you? Why should we not cast you back into the void where you belong?" Elias took a slow breath. He had no weapons, no power, no armies. All he had were his words. So he spoke plainly. "I don't ask you to believe in me," he said. "I only ask you to believe in what you saw in your general. He tells you I saved him, that we survived together. That's true, not because I'm strong like him, but because I refuse to give up. That's all I have, but sometimes it's enough." For a moment silence filled the hall. Then laughter burst from one of the nobles. Refuse to give up? That is your grand claim? How pathetic. Elias turned toward him calmly. Pathetic, maybe, but I'm standing here alive, and I think that counts for something. Koresh, standing at his side, could not hide a faint smile. The hall murmured again, divided between scorn and grudging respect. The ancient prophecy, it was then that the queen's advisor, an old alien with skin like silver stone, stepped forward. He carried a staff carved with ancient runes, his eyes deep with memory. Your Majesty, he said slowly, the words of the human remind me of the prophecy of the first queen. The queen's eyes narrowed. You dare bring that up now? The advisor bowed. Forgive me, but the signs match too well to be ignored. It was written, from beyond the stars will come a fragile one, small in form yet unyielding in spirit, and by their hand the empire's fate shall turn. The hall erupted into chaos. Some shouted that it was nonsense, others that it was truth revealed. Guards tightened their grip on their weapons as voices clashed like blades. The queen's crown flared with light, silencing all. Enough, she commanded. Her gaze turned to Elias once more. So you are to be the fragile one of prophecy? Is that what you claim? Elias shook his head. I claim nothing. I'm just a man who survived, nothing more. But his words only fueled the whispers. Some believed he was humble. Others thought it was a clever trick. The court was divided and the queen knew it. A test declared. The queen rose from her throne, her tall figure casting a shadow across Elias and Koresh. Very well, she said. Words alone cannot decide this. The empire will not be torn apart by whispers and doubts. She lifted her staff high. Let there be a trial. Let the human prove himself before the court, not with power, but with will. If he endures, we will know there is truth in his bond with General Koresh. If he fails, the bond will be broken and this foolishness will end. The courtiers cheered or scowled, but all agreed. A trial would decide. Koresh stepped forward, bowing deeply. My queen, I beg you. The queen raised her hand sharply. Silence, General. You chose this path when you bound yourself to him. Now he must walk it. Elias placed a hand on Koresh's arm. It's all right, he said quietly. I'll face whatever comes. Koresh looked at him, torn between anger and admiration. He saw no fear in Elias's eyes, only the same stubborn resolve that had carried him through the desert. Slowly, Koresh nodded. After the court, when the trial was declared, the session ended. The queen departed in silence, her robes flowing like shadows. The courtiers whispered excitedly, already speculating on the human's fate. Some were certain he would fail. Others, though fewer, whispered of destiny. Outside the hall, Koresh and Elias walked together through the palace corridors. The air was heavy with the weight of what was to come. You shouldn't have agreed, Koresh said finally. His voice was low, full of frustration. The trial will not be kind. They will want you to fail. Elias gave a faint smile. When have I ever had it easy? Koresh stopped, turning to face him. This is not the desert, Elias. This is politics. They will not test your strength. They will test your spirit, and they will push you until you break. Elias met his gaze calmly. Then I won't break. For a long moment, the two stood in silence. Then Koresh placed his hand on Elias's shoulder, his voice softer. You carry more than your own fate now. The queen is right. The empire itself is watching you. Elias nodded. Then I'll give them something worth watching. A kingdom waits that night. The news of the trial spread across the empire. On distant worlds, people argued in markets and temples. Could a human really matter to their future? Was this the fragile one of prophecy? Or was it a dangerous lie? The empire, strong for centuries, now trembled with doubt. In the palace, the queen sat alone in her private chamber. She gazed out at the stars, her thoughts heavy. She had ruled with wisdom and strength, but now something new had entered her empire, something she could not fully control. Her advisor's words echoed in her mind. Small in form, yet unyielding in spirit, she whispered softly to herself. If the prophecy is true, then everything will change. The day of the trial arrived. From across the empire, nobles, scholars, and warriors gathered in the capital to witness it. The great trial arena, carved into the very stone of the mountain, had not been used in generations. Its walls rose like jagged cliffs, and above it hung a glowing dome of energy that shimmered like captured lightning. The queen herself presided, her throne raised high upon a balcony that overlooked the entire circle. The people filled the seats, their voices a rising storm of curiosity and doubt. Many came expecting to see the human fall quickly, confirming their beliefs that such fragile beings had no place in the Empire's destiny. Others, though fewer, came with quiet hope. The prophecy whispered through the crowd like a hidden fire, small in form, yet unyielding in spirit. In the center of the arena stood Elias. His simple clothes had been replaced with plain garments given to him by the palace servants. He carried no weapon, no shield, nothing but himself. His eyes scanned the walls of the arena, then lifted to where General Koresh stood near the queen. Their gazes met, and Elias gave a faint nod. Koresh's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. He hated this trial, but he could not protect Elias now. This was something the human had to face alone. The queen's declaration. The queen rose, her voice carrying across the entire arena without effort. "People of the Empire," she said, her tone steady and powerful. "We gather today not for sport but for truth. A bond has been formed between one of our greatest generals and this human, a being from beyond our worlds. Some call it betrayal, others call it destiny. Today we shall see which it is." She raised her hand and the crowd fell silent. "This human will face 3 trials. He will not be tested in strength of body, for that is not his gift. He will be tested in spirit, in will, and in cunning. If he endures, then perhaps the prophecy is not mere words. If he fails, the bond shall be broken and this matter will end." The queen's eyes fixed on Elias. "Do you accept this trial?" Elias stood tall. "I accept." The first trial. The weight of stone at the queen's signal, the arena floor shifted. From hidden openings, massive blocks of stone rose, each one glowing faintly with energy. The trial master, a tall alien with silver skin, stepped forward. "The first trial is endurance. You must carry the weight of stone across the arena. Fail to reach the end before the horn sounds and you fail." The crowd murmured. Everyone knew a human's strength was nothing compared to an alien's. Many expected him to collapse quickly. But Elias walked to the first stone, placed his hands on it and pushed. It did not move at first. His muscles strained, sweat already forming on his brow. The crowd laughed cruelly. "Pathetic," someone shouted.
"He cannot even lift it."
But Elias did not stop. Inch by inch, he forced the stone forward. His body trembled, his face red with effort, yet his eyes burned with stubborn fire. Step by painful step, he dragged the block across the sand. Minutes turned to an hour. His hands bled, his back screamed with pain, but still he moved. When the horn finally sounded, Elias collapsed across the finish line, the stone beside him. The crowd roared with mixed cries, some mocking, others astonished. Against all odds, he had endured. Koresh felt pride swell in his chest. He knew this man. He had seen him refuse to surrender in the desert, and now the Empire saw it too. The second trial. The Maze of Shadows. After a short rest, the second trial began. The arena floor opened again, revealing a labyrinth of shifting walls cloaked in darkness. Strange sounds echoed from within, growls, hisses, the rustling of unseen creatures. "The second trial is courage," the trial master declared. "You must walk the Maze of Shadows. Inside lurk illusions and fears drawn from your own mind. You must find the center and retrieve the crystal of light. If you surrender or lose your way, you fail." The crowd hushed as Elias stepped into the maze. Darkness swallowed him instantly. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the first scream echoed, not from Elias but from the illusions themselves. The maze was alive with shadows twisting into shapes that clawed at his mind. He saw storm beasts from the desert, the wreck of his ship, even the faces of people he had lost long ago. Fear clawed at his heart, whispering for him to give in. But Elias pressed forward, remembering the desert nights when Koresh had nearly died and he had been the only one to keep them alive. Fear had come then too, but he had refused to listen. At last, through the shifting shadows, he saw the faint glow of the crystal. His hands reached out, seizing it, and the maze dissolved into light. The crowd gasped as he emerged. The crystal raised high in his hand. He had conquered his own fear. The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected him to falter. Instead, he had proven himself again. The third trial, the test of choice. The final trial was the most dangerous. The arena floor opened once more, revealing a deep pit filled with fire and smoke. 2 narrow bridges stretched across it, one stable but long, the other quick but crumbling. At the far side, 2 cages rose, one holding a wounded alien prisoner, the other holding only empty space. A voice rang out across the arena. "The third trial is wisdom and sacrifice. You may save the prisoner, or you may save yourself. Choose wrongly, and both may be lost. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. The test was cruel by design, meant to break the spirit of those who took it. Koresh's heart thundered in his chest. He wanted to shout, to end this madness, but the queen's gaze kept him silent. Elias studied the pit, the bridges, the cages. Sweat dripped from his brow, his body still aching from the earlier trials. Yet his mind worked quickly. The crumbling bridge could not hold him. The stable one was too long, but he remembered something from the desert. Never take the path they want you to see instead of crossing at once. Elias tore strips from his clothes, tied them into a rope, and hooked it to the broken panels left from the first trial. Step by step, he lowered himself into the pit, swinging across to the cage. The crowd gasped. It was reckless. It was dangerous, but it worked. He reached the prisoner's cage, forced it open with bleeding hands, and pulled the alien up with him. Together they crossed back, the rope snapping just as they reached the ledge. Elias fell to his knees, exhausted but alive, and the prisoner was free. The arena erupted. Half the crowd shouted in outrage, the other half in wild cheers. He had not only survived, he had saved another, choosing sacrifice over safety. After the trial, the queen rose once more, her crown blazing with light. The arena fell silent. The trials are complete, she declared. The human has endured the weight of stone. He has conquered the maze of shadows. He has chosen sacrifice in the test of choice. Whether prophecy or not, he has proven his spirit unyielding. She turned to Elias, her expression unreadable. You have earned a place in this court. But know this, your bond with General Koresh is now a matter of empire. The people will watch you, judge you, and perhaps follow you. Tread carefully, human. Elias bowed his head, his voice steady. I understand, Your Majesty. I didn't come here to be followed. I only came here to stand. The queen studied him for a long moment, then turned away. So be it. A bond strengthened. That night, as the city celebrated or argued in the streets, Koresh found Elias in the quiet of the palace gardens. The human sat beneath a tree, his body bruised and weary, but his eyes alive with fire. You were a fool, Koresh said, though his voice was thick with pride. You could have died 100 times today. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe, but you carried me once, remember? Guess it was my turn. Koresh sat beside him, his heavy armor clinking softly. For a long time they said nothing, simply looking at the stars. Finally Koresh spoke. Today you did more than survive. You changed something. I saw it in their eyes. Some still hate you, but others, they began to believe. Elias shook his head. I don't care if they believe in me. I just want them to see what humans can be. Koresh turned to him, his voice quiet. They will. You've given them no choice. The city never truly slept. Even in the deep of night, its towers glowed with blue light and the hum of energy lines filled the air. But this night was different. The air was tense, charged, as though the city itself knew danger was near. Elias lay awake in the chamber given to him by the queen. His body still ached from the trials, every bruise and cut reminding him of what he had endured. But it wasn't pain that kept him awake. It was the look he had seen in the queen's eyes after the trial. She had recognized his spirit, yet there was something else there too. Doubt. Calculation. He whispered to himself, staring at the ceiling. I won their test, but I don't think they're done testing me. Outside, on the high walls of the capital, Koresh stood in full armor watching the horizon. His instincts screamed danger. For days he had felt the movements of hidden factions within the empire, groups that despised the queen's decision to let the human live. He knew they would not stay quiet for long, and he was right. The ambush, the first attack, came just before dawn. The sky split with fire as warships marked with the crimson banners of the rival faction descended upon the city. Sirens wailed and the streets erupted into chaos. Soldiers rushed to their posts while civilians fled into shelters beneath the mountains. Koresh's roar echoed through the barracks. To arms, defend the queen! From his chamber, Elias felt the ground tremble. He ran to the balcony, staring in shock as alien ships unleashed volleys of energy across the city's outer defenses. The capital shook under the assault. A palace guard burst into his room. Human, you must stay here. It's not safe outside. But Elias shook his head. If this is about me, if this war is because I'm here, then I can't hide. He grabbed a small energy blade left in the room, its weight awkward in his hand. Take me to Koresh. The queen's dilemma high in her throne chamber, the queen stood tall as her advisors shouted in panic. "Your Majesty, we must evacuate. The rebels have allied with off-worlders. They strike to overthrow you." The queen raised her hand, silencing them. Her gaze turned to the smoke rising over her capital. Deep inside she felt the shadow of fear, but she buried it. A ruler could not bend. Then she heard the whispers of her counselors. "This began with the human. He divides us. If he falls, perhaps peace will return." For a moment she considered it, but then she remembered the trials, the weight Elias had carried, the shadows he had faced, the prisoner he had saved. No, she thought firmly. He is not the cause of this war. He may be the answer to it. Side by side, Koresh found Elias in the lower halls, already defying the guards who tried to keep him inside. The general's anger flared. "You fool, you should be hiding." Elias held the blade tighter. "I can't hide while they're dying out there. I'm not as strong as you, Koresh. I can't fight like your soldiers, but I can stand. And maybe that's enough." For a moment, Koresh wanted to order him back, but then he remembered the desert, the trials, the prophecy. He gave a sharp nod. "Then stand with me." Together they led a squad of soldiers into the streets. Flames licked at the walls, smoke choked the sky, and enemy troops poured through breaches in the outer defenses. The first clash came quickly. Enemy warriors, tall and armored, advanced with heavy blades. Koresh charged like a storm, his strikes brutal and precise. Beside him, Elias fought not with strength but with quick thinking, tripping enemies, using the terrain, distracting them so Koresh could strike the final blow. Again and again, the pair moved as one. The bond between them was clear, undeniable. The turning point word of their stand spread quickly. Soldiers fighting in the alleys and rooftops began to whisper, "The human fights beside the general." Some were shocked, others inspired. For the first time, the human was not seen as an outsider, but as a comrade. As the battle raged, the enemy pressed harder, unleashing machines of war that stormed the streets with roaring cannons. The defenders began to falter. Elias looked at Koresh, chest heaving with exhaustion. "We can't just hold them. We need to strike their heart." Koresh's eyes narrowed. He pointed to the largest warship hovering above the city, its banners blazing crimson. "Their commander is there. If we cut off the head, the body will fall." Elias nodded. "Then let's cut it off." The assault on the warship with the Queen's reluctant approval, Elias and Koresh led a daring assault. A small craft launched from the palace hangars, weaving through fire until it latched onto the underside of the enemy flagship. Inside, they fought through narrow halls, Koresh's blade flashing, Elias guiding them through traps and corridors. Finally, they reached the command chamber. The rebel leader stood waiting, a towering alien clad in black armor, his eyes burning with hatred. "So the rumors are true," he sneered. "The mighty general and his human pet." Koresh stepped forward, fury in his voice. "This is no pet. This is my brother in arms." The duel that followed shook the ship. Koresh and the rebel leader clashed with savage power, their blows shattering steel and sending sparks across the room. Elias darted around the edges, striking at weak points, distracting the enemy long enough for Koresh to press forward. At last, with one final strike, Koresh drove his blade through the rebels' armor. The leader fell, and the warship shuddered as its forces lost command. The victory and the decision. With their leader slain, the rebel forces scattered. Some surrendered, others fled into the void. The capital, though scarred and burned, still stood. The people cheered as Koresh and Elias returned, battered but alive. In the throne chamber, the queen rose to meet them. Her eyes studied Elias closely, and for the first time she spoke not with doubt but with respect. "You stood when others wished you to fall," she said gravely. "You saved my city, my people, and even my throne. The bond between you and Koresh is no weakness. It is strength." She turned to her court, her voice ringing like steel. "Let it be known across the empire, the human is no outsider. He is one of us." The court erupted in shock and protest, but also in cheers. For the first time, Elias was not just a stranger. He was part of something greater. Under the stars that night, the fires in the city slowly faded, replaced by the quiet glow of starlight. On the palace balcony, Elias and Koresh stood side by side, gazing at the sky. "You realize," Elias said softly, "that today wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, about proving we don't have to be divided. Koresh nodded. The Queen saw it. The people saw it. You showed them what it means to fight not for yourself but for each other. Elias smiled faintly. Funny thing is, I thought I came here alone, but I don't feel alone anymore. Koresh placed a hand on his shoulder, heavy but warm. You never will be again, brother. Above them, the stars burned bright, a reminder that the universe was vast, dangerous, and filled with unknown challenges. But together, human and alien, they would face whatever came next.